when I started the account, I was a Christian pastor.
Did you like lose your faith in some dramatic way, or were you just like, no, I still have my faith, but
Getting into spirits and cocktails has only been about discovery. It's only been positive. And then started getting some pushback from some people or some family members, and it was kind of like, are you sure you want to go down this road? And I was like,
what was the process like of writing a cocktail book?
nothing is stopping you from making content.
Jordan Hughes, better known as the High Proof Preacher, is a videographer, cocktail content creator, published author with over 220,000 Instagram followers, and someone who can fit an entire bottle of wine in one glass. Hater of vodka, someone who teaches bartenders and other cocktail content creators how to film and shoot their cocktails, and someone who certainly fakes all of those sexy shots expressing citrus peels. And it was really awesome to have Jordan on Behind the Stick this week. Shift some gears and talk about my good friend Jordan Hughes, better known as the High Proof Preacher. Man, I wanted to ask you this the other day, but I was like, this one I know I can't ask you until we have a camera rolling, because I know the answer is going to be incredible. But High Proof Preacher, that name obviously has a lot of weight in history. Where does it come from?
yeah, I mean, I feel like anyone who, creates a Instagram or YouTube, it's always like, oh, what am I going to call this? And you put like way too much pressure on yourself to be like, it has to, Louis Fern. I mean, so many people have to have like, the perfect name. It's just like, so funny, but I feel like it was just, I think my wife is the one who came up with it, but it's kind of a call back to my previous life, where when I started the account, I was a Christian pastor at a church. So I went to Bible college, did the whole have a degree in Bible and theology, worked at this church for a few years, burned out super hard, ready to do something totally different. But I started the account kind of right as I was kind of ending my time there, just because I was into cocktails, into photography, and it was just kind of this funny way of kind of like making that cool, I don't know about cool, but funny comparison of like, all right, being a pastor, preacher, whatever, but also being into cocktails and spirits. So
Right.
that's at least
So you were a man of the cloth.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow. That is not something that you hear every day in this industry. Let's dig into that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, it was like a very non-linear career path. Yeah, like grew up youth group kid, went to Bible college, all of that, like I said.
But where did you grow up?
In Portland, Oregon, which
in Portland. So you live in the area that you grew up in. Okay.
More or less. I grew up kind of out in the suburbs, and then as the city, I feel like as I kind of came of age, the city really kind of took off. That's when kind of, the Portlandia show came out, which wasn't necessarily huge everywhere. It was huge here, but definitely that's kind of like a lot of Portlanders kind of have that before Portlandia and after Portlandia time. The city just really kind of took off, and food and beverage scene really went crazy too. So like, it doesn't feel like I'm living in the city I grew up in. It feels like a very different vibe.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then even COVID and stuff, like it's another era now. We're figuring out, so constantly changing. But so grew up in this area. Grew up as like church kid. Also grew up like didn't have any alcohol in the house. Parents are very much like, they had a Christian upbringing, but they're like the cool Christians. They're a little more progressive, but they were at least like, didn't have alcohol in the house just because they both had kind of some family stuff where they're like trying to kind of break, some family patterns that they had with their siblings or their parents just with alcohol issues. So they were like, we're just going to make sure our kids don't have to experience that. So I feel like part of that, it's funny how I ended up getting into now cocktails and spirits, but part of that I feel like I'm very thankful for because, there's parts about my upbringing I kind of make fun of just being like, yeah, youth group kid and kind of sheltered or whatever. But there's a side of that too where like I don't have any negative associations to, I'm just thinking even when I pour my friends some tequila or rum where they drink it and they're like, oh no, this just makes me think of college, or this makes me think of, this terrible night in high school. Well, for me, I was
you've
like,
never built up any crazy associations with anything because you never
where it's
drank.
like I don't have like for me is getting into spirits and cocktails has only been about discovery. It's only been positive, which is just kind of unique. I feel like.
Wait a minute, but you didn't have like a Rumspringa moment at some point in your teens where you were like, "Ooh, I just got to have it all. I've not ever had this. Now I'm gonna have it all."
You didn't drink Jose Cuervo and Capri Sun in college?
No. That's the thing. Also, with like going to Bible college, part of at this like private college I went to is like you had to sign a contract that you wouldn't drink while you were enrolled. So I didn't even drink. Yeah, where it was like you could get full on expelled sort of deal. So I didn't even drink when I turned 21. I think it was.
So
like,
wait a minute. What denomination of Christianity? I'm assuming it's Christianity.
Yes.
Because that's
definitely
not a Catholic college because they're drunks. So,
Sure.
But Catholics drink. So
Yeah, totally. Honestly, the reason we have good spirits and beer, like, oftentimes are thanks to monks and the men of the cloth, right?
Right, so, totally.
I was just like pretty non-denominational, but like I think just the school itself was just kind of like set like we're a Bible college. Like,
right.
I was also pretty young going to, like, I went straight out of high school too. And so it wasn't like a huge deal for me personally. Again, I was coming out of being a youth group kid. And I never really had like well, fuck it. Now I'm going to have everything. So,
right.
So in that sense, it's like, I kind of appreciate that aspect of it, of just like, cool, like I don't have like these bad memories associated with tequila or rum or all of that. But anyway, it's all just kind of it feels like a totally different life now, which is funny, but that's at least kind of the background.
And so
no, go ahead, Louis.
I was gonna say, so you go to Bible college, a Christian college, studying theology. You graduate and you start working as a pastor directly, like right out of college.
Kind of. I went overseas for a year. I did like an internship at a church in Estonia, of all places, so Eastern Europe. But yeah, I was like working at a church out there, and then came back. Did kind of a bunch of stuff for a while, but was always kind of trying to get a church job, and then got a job here for, I think it was like almost 4 years of working at a church, doing like youth pastor stuff, and then would do some like preaching here and there. But that was like, I think I was about 25, 26 when I kind of finished, when I was kind of like, all right, I need to do something.
So what was that moment like? What happened? Were you just like, did you lose your faith in some dramatic way, or were you just like, no, I still have my faith, but this just isn't for me anymore. It's too stressful, or what was the deal?
Yeah, a little bit of all of that, I guess. There's a certain level of, I don't know how far you guys want to get into politics, but it was like...
I'll get into politics, but it might be very illuminating. You will see just how far left-wing a person can be. If you talk to me about politics, I'll get into it.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
so Marius never wants me to talk about politics because he knows that like at least a quarter of the audience are Trumpers, and we apparently can't offend them. But no, let's go ahead.
Well, no, I'm sure we'll be fine then, because it was around Trump got elected. There was kind of this weird side of again, had always grown up in the church, always kind of been in this kind of church Christian bubble, and I think having been working for the church for a few years was also like challenging in the way of I think part of what was really attractive for me to wanting to be a pastor and work at a church was like, oh, it's not about making sales, it's not about KPIs, it's about like caring for people. And for me growing up, my mentors and heroes was like my youth pastor, and like people where it's like, oh, like your job seems really fun, you get to like hang out with people and genuinely care for people. And then once I kind of got into it, I was like, churches still have to make money. There's still KPIs. So there's still, it's like you gotta, and that was like, I was aware of that, but like once you get into it, there's just certain frustrations where I was like, there's just this weird level of like, okay, this is now my livelihood. but there's things about it that I don't like or that I have doubts about or want to challenge. But like, this is my job. It's not just like, oh, this is my faith. This is also like what keeps a roof over my head. And that in itself caused a ton of anxiety, where I've never really struggled with anxiety, or at least not like very obviously, until kind of a few years into working at a church, where I was starting to be physically affected by it, where there were these things where like the business end of church that I was like, this is new, hadn't considered this. There was kind of the Trump being elected and seeing the massive support from, broad strokes here, but like the faith community very much in support of Trump,
which is completely crazy to me.
Right. And that was
so
same too, of like having grown up in the church and in Sunday school and learning all these things about the Bible and what Jesus was about. I was like, wait, why are we in support of this guy? This seems to be totally the opposite of any of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the church I was working at too was very like, again, it's like I'm in Portland. Faith community here also tends to be more on the progressive side as well. But there's still this side of like, just Christianity as a whole, or American Christianity, I guess. I was like, what has happened here? And there's also kind of just this breakdown of, as I was also getting into cocktails and spirits, again, as a hobby thing, as something I enjoyed, it was weird to like, I was getting to know bartenders. I was actually like kind of getting to know the community in Portland, which is very much like, something where growing up, that was something that was like, oh no, this is bad. This is not of the Lord, sort of thing. And then jumping into like hanging out with bartenders and getting to know this community, where I was like, this community actually feels much more aligned with what I'd been taught growing up than like my faith community. That was, again, this is broad strokes. Like, there are incredible Christian people who I still have in my life who like give me hope for American churchianity. But it was just kind of like this multiple breakdowns at once, I think, where it was kind of like, like the world doesn't work the way I thought it worked. And I think all of that just kind of came to a head for me, where I'm like, but I'm working at a church. My livelihood depends on me believing all of these things. And I felt like and it's not necessarily I had this all processed when I made this decision to step away, but there was just kind of this moment of like, I need to do something different for a while, unrelated to church, unrelated to being a pastor, just to figure out my own shit. Because it was like, anxiety was eating me up. Yeah.
Obviously, you were like, I need a drink.
Yeah. And I'd started High Proof Preacher. It was like, again, creative outlet sort of thing. And that was getting a little weird, where I didn't put my name or my face on the account for a little bit. And then I started doing that, and then started getting some pushback from some people or some family members. And it was kind of like, very much kind of presented in like, are you sure you want to go down this road? And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to Ireland. See ya. It was like basically how, I mean, maybe didn't necessarily say it, to certain people that way, but
what year did you create High Proof Preacher?
Yeah, so I started in, I guess it was 2017.
Really? 2017? Because here's the deal. I have this, maybe I'm misremembering this, but maybe in like the very early days of Barfly, which we also started. We started at the end of 2017. Okay. I was still running the bar at Cole's, and I have a friend named Elliot Montero, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
He's the Montenegro brand ambassador here, and then also like
love that
in
guy.
His own right, a very talented photographer and content creator. Oh, yeah. We used to do photo shoots at Cole's all the time, just for like his own content. He would just be like, hey, do you want to do a photo shoot? And I'd be like, sure, come to the bar. And then we started, kind of working on Zest shots, and he would always reference you. He would always be like, I'm trying to get that High Proof Preacher Zest shot, right? And I was always like, who is this guy, High Proof Preacher? I got to like figure out who this guy was. And at that time in LA, they were only like, this is kind of early days. Yeah. For like 2017 was kind of early days for cocktail influencers or whatever. So we had like Saeed House, right? Yeah. Cocktails by Hawk. We had Bad Birdie, Amanda.
Yeah.
And we had Charity K. Johnson. And like those were like the LA based. And this was like, I had
the
like
LA crew.
I had 40 subscribers at the time.
Yeah.
And I was kind of trying to do it.
Sure.
But he would always reference you. So I always thought that you started so much before me.
But did you know that those Zest shots are faked?
Shut up, man.
Just a guy behind him with a spray bottle. Just use a spray bottle and then replicate it in Adobe.
My favorite comments that Jordan gets are people being like, "Oh, that's so fake."
Which those are my favorite comments because then I get to, like, oh, cool, reply with video.
It's a nice little plug.
Yeah, it started then. Yeah, I feel like I said, like that was kind of early days for like the online cocktail world. Where for me, I remember, the LA crew that you're talking about, kind of the best drink ever. You always kind of had.
Oh yeah, best drink ever is another one. Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of had all these LA peeps, and then like for me, there was Elliot Clark, apartment bartender.
Yep.
It was beautiful.
Oh, and we can't forget the Josue as well.
The Garnish guy.
The Garnish guy. The Garnish guy. Can't forget the Garnish guy.
Yeah,
he was amazing too, and such a good dude. Just like
I miss
just
him
one
so
of the
much.
best dudes.
Ugh. Yeah. Yeah, it was like, there were definitely people doing it, but it was, a much smaller lineup, right? So, for me, like, I feel like I very much started in the shadow of Elliot, apartment bartender, and was kind of like, I feel like he was the first guy I saw who, like, went on a cool trip and was like, wait, like, some brand just flew you out somewhere? What? And he was kind of the one I remember like DMing and trying to figure out like how do you do this, and he was also just always so just like no ego, just like always so like supportive and encouraging. I feel like when I started out, it was just kind of like a lot of times I was just like watching him and trying to figure out like how can I do this too, and I never ever got a sense from him that it was like, oh dude, stop trying to ride my coattails or stop trying to. He's always just been like so supportive and along the way I kind of found my own style and way of doing things. But early on, I feel like I owe a lot to him of just being very just cool about what he was doing and open with ideas and tips and just like practical stuff of just like, dude, you're undercharging for, once I started getting some brand stuff. But it was like definitely a smaller group. And it was like it feels like a lifetime ago now because even just social media itself has changed so much since then. But
oh my god, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
you've never actually been a bartender professionally, right?
Yeah, so kind of around when the I quit the church job, it was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna figure out just something else to do for a while. It was never kind of like, all right, what's my long term? It's just like do something different. And like I kind of chased down, or I was looking into like, okay, maybe I can bartend, and met up with a few different guys in Portland. Most well known is probably Jeff Morgenthaler. Also Ryan McGarrian, who's like the co-founder of Aviation Gin, who now owns a few bars here. Just kind of was like, figured out who are the industry names. Can I talk with them to see like what's bartending like? It's like I had an idea, but it's like, what actually making this a career? Could I do this sort of thing? So I did some like event bartending. There were just a variety of different events. There's like a Nike event because that's their headquarters is here. Just a few different like private events where I'd come up with like a 3-drink menu, and I enjoyed doing that. And then as I kind of got into it more, I was like, oh yeah, like I've got to work nights and weekends, and I was kind of like, if I'm at a career crossroads, it's like, if I have the chance here to do, set my schedule or whatever, I want to try that, something where I could do that. So that's where I was kind of like, maybe I can be a photographer. Maybe I could have more flexibility there. But then all the photographers I knew that I was talking with were all like wedding photographers. And they're like, yeah, we work nights, weekends, and, summers and all that.
So basically bar hours.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's the same deal. Right. So I ended up doing some like graphic design stuff. I thought that would be my direction. And then I was doing High Proof Preacher just as like a creative outlet. I started reaching out to distilleries that were in town just to like, shoot some of their stuff for content and to like be touring distilleries in Portland, and was very locally focused at first. And then as I kind of was just doing some design stuff and then photography stuff, as I was going, found I was more known for taking photos of drinks and taking these photos at distilleries where I would come and just be like, can I just tour and take some photos just for my own content sort of thing. And as I was doing that, these distilleries would be like, we like your stuff. Can we hire you to shoot our social media content or run our social media? So I started doing that where I'd be like taking imagery of their products or cocktails, but I'd also be coming up with drinks for them. Because oftentimes like these small mom and pop distilleries, they know their spirits and know their products. They aren't necessarily like cocktail experts, right? So they were like, oh, this guy knows how to make cool drinks. And they built out a cocktail recipe section on their website sort of thing. So I kind of got started doing what I do, just doing that sort of thing, helping out the kind of mom and pop shops, the small distilleries. And then I feel like it just kind of started snowballing from there, where social media certainly helped with that, where like as the account grew and you'd go to Tales of the Cocktail in New Orleans. I think I went for the first time in 2018 and I was like, kind of like, where am I? What have I done? Like, just like, so that was kind of my first intro to like the industry. But even just going there, like met so many people, bartenders, as well as like PR agency people who are kind of the people I needed to meet, or they're the people who hire photographers and creators and all of that. So I feel like that kind of helped me progress as well.
I actually have never been to Tales of the Cocktail.
Oh, hey.
I've been in this industry for like 17 years or something, and I've never been. Because in the early days of like when I started doing actual cocktails, because I worked in a series of like nightclubs and sort of just like, kind of this sort of bartending, and then when I started doing like professional cocktails, like I had little kids, like my kids were born.
Sure.
So like I couldn't just go. I don't even think I was a bartender with 2 kids. Like I didn't have the money to like travel myself to Tales of the Cocktail. So then I always said, well, I'll go to Tales of the Cocktail when I have a reason to go. Yeah. And I started Educated Barfly, and then every year it's like I should go to Tales of the Cocktail. But then I'm like, is it worth the expense? Like, we just do videos. They don't even take content creators really seriously. Like, we don't get nominated for anything really yet. So I never went. Now I think next year though, because now we have a few products in the market, we've got some things going on. So I feel like next year is going to be my first year.
And dude, honestly, like, as far as awards go, definitely don't take us seriously. But every time I've applied for a media pass, they've accepted me like right away. So they are very, like, as far as like giving you free access to stuff.
Well, that's cool.
If you're a creator,
consider that.
I think my initial one, when I applied, I was like, all right, I was doing some stuff I was doing some imagery for like Vine Pair and Thirsty and some of these like publications. So I kind of like put in like, oh, I freelance for these guys. But then like meeting some of their PR team, they're like, oh, like we love having, at the time, like bloggers was kind of what they were thinking of, like, oh, we love having bloggers here. And, you can just put in your own stuff and love to have you. So there is that side, at least. If you are a writer, creator, YouTuber, it's like they are very supportive in the sense of like, we want you to come and experience this. Whether you promote it or not, it's like we want you here. So that is at least in my experience, I've felt that appreciation, at least, especially in the last few years.
Right.
So I didn't know about the media pass either. Jordan was the one who told me, because when I met him first time at Tales, and I'm gonna have to tell the story because I love it. It's I didn't know about that you had to sign up for all of these events ahead of time to RSVP and all of this. And then I think within like 20 minutes of speaking with Jordan, he goes, "Man, you should just apply for a media pass." And I was like, "Fuck, I didn't think of that." So then there's one night we're going out to a party, and I had to pretend to be Jordan's assistant to get into an event, and it was great. It worked out, so it was cool.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna go this year. I'll definitely apply for the media pass. I think that I have enough sponsors that actually I can just ask for a plane ticket out, and
dude, that's where like
Marius and I can just make some content and
totally
make it worthwhile, for everybody. So
that's where like I book my hotel flights ahead of time. 'Cause for me, it's just something where I'm like, I'm going, like, every year I'm like, this is worth it. There's multiple things for me that are like worth it to go to.
Right.
But it's also something where I'm like, like I have enough contacts now where I'm like, all right, if I can get one paid thing, which is what creators do, it's what bartenders do. I feel like a lot of people go into Tales thinking like every brand that's anything is here. It's like, so I always kind of book stuff and then go into like, all right, if I can get one paid thing to kind of reimburse myself for the cost of travel and the stay, like worth it. And I've been able to do that every year. It's like I'll book it ahead of time because like right now, like they open up their Tales block in the Ritz and it's $200 a night, pretty cheap. And it's like I just book it and I'm like I'll make this money back pretty easily. So,
I mean, I think this might be kind of late for next year, but I do think that like all of us, everybody just does a party, like a big, everybody's got an hour block to bartend. Even if you could probably do it. You could do a bar shift now, probably. You know enough cocktails. You could do a bar shift now. And then we could just get a brand to sponsor every hour. Yeah. A different brand for every hour.
Definitely not too late to do that.
But not to shift gears, but one of the things that happened last year, and it's going to give me a hook for what I want to talk about next, is Jordan is also a published author. He has his own cocktail book. And one of the craziest things last year was he had a book signing, and his books didn't arrive. And so and this was at Tales. And so Jordan, how was it to write a book? Because in here, there's a lot of really awesome classic cocktails. And it's what I love about the book personally is that it's just the more and more I read it, it looks just like you, right? Like there's really great classic cocktails, but the photos and the imagery is just absolutely stunning. Like it's absolutely gorgeous. So what was the process like of writing a cocktail book? And, how has it been since you published it? And, what did you kind of learn from it, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, the process itself was pretty I've never really done anything like that before. I was a little hesitant just because, there is that side of me that's like, oh, but I'm not a bartender. I feel like there is a little bit of, I think because I've heard that sentiment from real bartenders who are like, oh, there's a few writers or kind of journalist types who have written cocktail books. And I, kind of heard that from bartender friends who are like, oh, this person isn't even a bartender. What are they doing putting out a cocktail book? So I was definitely a little hesitant. I think I kind of absorbed some of that of trying to make sure I stay in my lane sort of thing. So that's where I kind of went into it more of the publisher that, they reached out to me, which was very flattering of just this publisher kind of did a lot of cookbooks and they're like, oh, we'd love to do kind of more stuff in the cocktail space. And they were kind of like, you're someone who was very much kind of visually focused, right? Where they're like, we've seen your photography and we're like, a book with your imagery would be crazy. So going into it, it was much more of kind of this coffee table book type concept. It was much more focused on the visuals. And kind of as we were discussing stuff, they're like, wait, you actually know your shit. So could we actually do a recipe book? So it ended up kind of getting into it. I was like, all right, we'll do recipes and we'll kind of share my approach. It very much tried to keep it kind of geared for the home enthusiast. Cause at the end of the day, that's essentially what I am, so it's very much trying to set it up as here's the glassware you need. Here's how to think through what bottles to buy for your home bar, so it's very much kind of more geared with kind of a piece of intro material for someone who's figuring out how to make drinks at home. So yeah, and we got into it kind of end of COVID. So there's still a lot of supply chain issues. So it was really fast. I think a lot of people who are working on books right now, talking with them oh yeah, it comes out in 2 years. And I was like, 2 years? I signed the contract in January and it came out in December the same year. It was literally 1 year from signing the contract to putting out the book.
That's so crazy. It
was so fast.
So that's a fast timeline as opposed to a slower timeline.
Yeah, because we signed it in January and it was let's get this out by the holidays because that would, just a great time to put. And the book ended up coming out again, there were still issues. It came out 3 days before Christmas. So it didn't even really work.
I talked to publishers that were most people do recipe books. I've talked to publishers where they're we'll do a lot of cookbooks, right? And they say most of our authors will release in 6 months. And I was that's really fast. 6 months.
So fast.
How can you write a book in 6 months?
Yeah. I was talking to someone recently, and they were saying that they are signed on to do a cocktail book, but theirs isn't coming out until 2025, and they have most of it done now. And so they had to submit it a couple of weeks ago, but they said that it's only going to be published in 2025, which that's a big timeline. But 6 months, that's crazy.
Yeah. But why would they? If they've got the book done, then why don't they just publish it?
Right. I know. Yeah.
I mean, maybe they're waiting for a window. I don't know anything about publishing, but I really don't.
Yeah. Because for me, it's I signed the contract in January, had to have it finished, written by end of March. and have all the have everything done basically by like May 1st. So it's like I had to do everything in 4 months for them to then, design everything, get it to a printer, all of that. So like it was.
So you actually had to write the book in 3 months. You had 3 months to actually write the body of the book, like all of the the manuscript.
Yeah. So it's like very much started out as like, let's do table of contents and like your recipes first. So let's figure out like kind of what categories of drinks, make sure you like kind of dial in. They're like, we don't want to get to the end of the process and you're still tinkering with recipes sort of thing. So it's very much like get all the recipes kind of dialed in, get your table of contents, your structure, and then just like go hard writing it. Basically, I just, for those few months, I was like, every Friday, I'm doing nothing but writing. And I would just write for that day. And it's like every Friday was like book writing day. Right. And then I kind of shot myself in I was thinking like, I'll have it written and then I'll do all the photos after, just because that felt easier for me. But so I did just like the month of April was like shooting the book. And that nearly killed me because I was just like, I have to shoot, over 75 cocktails in a month, which doesn't sound crazy because I was like, I'm a cocktail photographer. This is the easy part. But I've like, there's also just the mental side of like, most everything I've put out, it lives online. It's editable. You can archive it. You could delete it, edit it. Where this is like, this just feels so permanent. So just every image is like, I have to pick one image for each drink. And I got to be able to be like, I don't want to hate this book in a year, like I want these to be images that I'm proud of. I'm like, people are going to pay their own money to get this. So I kind of underestimated the mental toll of it, of just like, it's not just, pop into my garage studio downstairs and knock out 8 drinks. And it was like, I was only shooting like 2, maybe 3 drinks in a day. Mm-hmm. And that itself felt like so intense because it was like, this isn't right. I'm going to make it again. I'm going to, and I shot all of it in my garage. So it was just like, just felt like I was in a hole for a month, just trying to get all of these, like, these all have to be perfect. So I definitely underestimated that, just kind of like the load of it, kind of your own weight that you're putting on yourself, or that I put on myself to do it. But in the end, like I'm happy with how it came out. There's still a certain level of, again, supply chain issues. It was going to be hardcover, and it's not hardcover. I was like really bummed about that. The publisher was trying to be like, oh, it actually like tends to sell easier because you can sell it for cheap. But I'm like, yeah, but I'm known for doing everything kind of high production value, and I just kind of, for a while, I was kind of like, I was just kind of pissed that it wasn't hardcover. So there's ultimately happy with how it came out, but there is kind of this level of like, it's like, oh, like I kind of want to do another book someday. More realistically, I'm like, I think I would like, if I was to do another book, I'd want to do it with somebody else. Part of it just for to be able to share the load a bit, but also like for me, I'm like, I come alive with the visual element and when I'm creating and shooting, and it was a ton of work for those, that month that I was in the hole doing it. But that's very much like, if I could kind of collaborate with someone who truly is, an expert on the bar side, that I think would be really fun, to where like, I'm not doing everything. Maybe I'm more of the visual side and it's more of a true collaboration. Right. That's probably something I would like to do eventually, but also not in a hurry to do it.
Every single person that writes a cocktail book needs a photographer. So I'm sure you could shoot many books if you wanted to. I mean,
sure.
Duly noted.
Yeah. Hey.
You might be doing Louis' book apparently. I have a question that might have already kind of been answered a little bit. So I don't know. You can tell me if you think it's repetitive, but I always wonder this about anybody that writes a cocktail book nowadays, because there's so many. I mean, even before the explosion of cocktails online, there are so many cocktail recipe books that come out every year, and a lot of them are just repeats of each other. There's not really a lot of. I mean, there's not that much, I don't know, interesting or very unique information. I think it's all interesting, but just unique information about cocktails. And so, was it that the like, what was your in when they said like, we want you to write this book too because you know what you're talking about? You're like, okay, cool. At first my in was the pictures. Yeah. But But aside from that, like, what was your approach to writing the content part of the book?
Yeah, I mean, for that, like, yeah, and honestly, like, it's something where I'm always like, should I say this? Should I not? Where, always when you put out a book, your publisher wants you to submit for awards and stuff. And I did when it came out, but I was like, I'm not expecting this book to win any awards. Like,
right.
I feel like once there's like a Death & Co. or a, Morgenthaler putting out the Liquid Intelligence, like there's these cocktail books that have just kind of defined cocktail books where I'm all like, you got to do something really innovative to like surpass that, or to even be like, this is a book that changes the category. I'm like very much self-aware enough to be like, yeah, like this book isn't going to like change how we think of cocktails. It was more like, it kind of took in a sense, like the cocktail codex approach a little bit of just like approaching cocktails as a template. And I've always just really loved that approach from Death & Co. and the way they map stuff out in cocktail codex.
Okay, I got to
it's complex. Here. It's like codex.
I just got to interject here really quick. That approach is not from Death & Company. That approach,
right.
Yeah, that's a bartender approach that's been around.
Oh, sure. We've all been saying that.
They brilliantly made it into a book, but they didn't invent it.
Totally, right. And sorry, I should have said that. Where it's like, they're at least one of the first people I saw who actually like put it into like, here's the visual, here's the book.
They named it.
People have been saying that for years and years before that. Totally. Right. So yeah, that's where like, because even before that book, it was like every bartender friend I talked to was like, yeah, start with the classics. Like, yeah, look at the sour. That's a template. So that's definitely just kind of been more common, education for a while.
Right.
But so that's where, when the Death & Co. one came out, it was like, I loved it as kind of a nerd. But like I was finding as I would recommend that for people, a lot of people are like, this is overwhelming, or when you open up that page and there's just like the graphs of like, here's the old fashioned and everything coming off of that.
I would kind of argue that like even Toby Maloney just made like a brilliant book, Bartender's Manifesto, but I would kind of argue that those are professional bartender books for people who are either deeply cocktail nerds or bar professionals. And I think that like Liquid Intelligence, almost all of the Death & Company books, save maybe the first one, are really just alienating an entire section of the population. I think that Death & Company's... I've actually looked at Death & Company's sales. I was able to see what their sales were, and they are very high. But I think they trade on the Death & Company name. But I think that, I think that there, is a place in the market for a book that has good information, but it's I don't want to say dumbed down, but it's just not going into these crazy specific things that people are just like, whoa,
totally.
like a graph of like a family tree of cocktails, and people are just like, I don't even know how to read this, like a person that just doesn't know, but they want to be able to make a good old fashioned,
Right. And to Jordan's credit, like in his book, I think that he did a pretty great job of making it digestible for people who want to get into it. Because one of the things that I've seen, at least with making content as well, is that you've got a lot of people who are really into this stuff, and they're the ones who frequent cocktail bars the most. They're like, the biggest clientele of what we do, both consuming content, but also consuming, cocktails. And I think that there just needed to be a book that is a little bit more like, hey, I love cocktails. I want to make them at home, but I don't need to know the crazy depths of everything. And I actually think that reading through Jordan's book, I get that impression that this was created with that in mind, with making it easier to digest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's where I would, I'm totally fine with saying dumb down, where like there is this level of, cause like looking at the book, if you're to look through the table of contents, it's like a lot of classic drinks. You got, old fashioned, classic recipe, and then the following ones immediately following that are twists on an old fashioned. And it's like, that's just how it's all laid out, but it's not super like it. I wanted it to still read like, if you just want to thumb through it and look at the pictures, you can do that. You can thumb through it, and it's like it's not like even laid out like, okay, here's this that goes off of this. I just wanted it to be very like, you can pick this book up in the middle and find recipes you want to create, or you could read it through like a storybook and you'll pick up the like, like this is how you can, figure out this classic and then start messing around with it. And so that's where like very much wanting to like make a book similar to how I make content. And that's where I feel like my role, and both you guys I feel like are excellent at this too, where like, we essentially, our role in the industry online part is like we kind of are the bridge between the consumer, the person who's just like, I like cocktails, I don't really know much about it, and the industry side or the nerd. And I say nerdy as a positive thing of just like bridging that aspect of like, like people who follow our stuff or who subscribe to Educated Barflights, like a lot of bartenders, also a lot of people who like you said, just trying to make a good old fashioned, a good margarita.
I would actually say that my demographic is really the nerds. Like,
sure. It's like some of us regular, like we probably have a different combination of both.
Yeah, it is a combination, but like cheating toward the nerds, I think, for my thing, because I like to get super nerdy. I love to get
and that's the thing,
nerdy.
but like also like there's some nerds, again, if you're a nerd listening, I say that positively, but like I've gotten to know quite a few cocktail nerds who are like not bartenders, but are so intense about like they want to learn the thing. So that's like they love your stuff and like they love getting the Death & Co books. And that's where like with Twist, I was like definitely trying to focus more. Like I tried to have some nerd stuff in there, tried to have like as well as like I'm thinking through like my neighbor who's just like loves cocktails, but like there's a certain level of if like there's ingredients he can go and get at the store, like he'll go to a certain level of like I'm gonna make a good drink and I can go to this liquor store and find this whiskey or find this, but I want it to be like at least somewhat digestible and attainable for people, so I tried to strike that balance of kind of generally how I aim with creating content, where like I don't go quite as much on the nerdy side, but it's also like just trying to make making quality drinks something that doesn't feel like out of reach for people. And I hope that like comes across in the book of just like like you can pick it up and there's some nerdier aspects, but it's something that like you really can just flip to any page and kind of start to figure things out. So that was the goal, at least. Again, not thinking that's going to change the world or that's going to get some James Beard Award or anything like that, but at least something that I could like put out and be like, this feels like an extension of what I do, rather than just like this random like I have followers, so I made a book.
Right.
Felt it could be something like, all right, like this is actually something of value that especially people who already follow me or who appreciate my content can now have something that they can just pull off the shelf versus having to like, what drink did he post about? Where can I find that? So
right. Totally. Well, then also part of writing a book is also like, how well does this sell? And just like in YouTube, you can go for a lot of subscribers or you can go for quality content. Very rarely those things meet together. And in cocktail books, it's like you can go for a James Beard award-winning book.
Right.
Or you can go for something that's super accessible and is going to sell a lot of copies and is going to give you the opportunity to then write another book because your book sold well enough for the publisher to keep it in print. And then on top of that, because of that, you've made them enough money that you can then, they're going to say, okay, I'm going to put another, $20,000 behind you to make another book.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So I feel like sometimes those things just aren't the same thing,
Sure. No, totally. No, that's a good point. Definitely.
But Jordan, the other thing about that we talked a little bit about is your photography work, right? And so one of the things that I find fascinating about what you do is that, so you have the High Proof Preacher account, but then you also have this whole other section of the cocktail camera. And you even have a YouTube channel where it's basically dedicated to teaching people how to use their cameras for photo and video work of cocktails. And I think that is such an amazing thing. And I have two questions. One is, I know you're working on, I think you're working on an e-course, or you have the e-course already?
Yeah, you have a few different e-courses, but I'm always kind of working on adding different offerings to it. So, yeah.
So my question was, one, I would like your course for free because we're friends. And two, what's that like, man? Where
free then too.
Done.
What's that been like, and what's the inspiration behind? Because obviously it seems like you have a passion for photography, but like, if you want to talk a little bit more about like the cocktail camera and that side of what you do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, basically, Cocktail Camera kind of started during pandemic, where pandemic, everyone's online, and with that, I was finding people were coming to me for advice and tips, tricks, whatever you want to call it, more for cocktail photography than they were for actually making cocktails. Because there's tons of cocktail creators, several who are on this trip with us too, are like, started in 2020, and a lot of people kind of found their spot in 2020, right? And that's kind of when I feel like there was a big boom in just content creators in all sorts of different circles. But people were coming to me less around, how do you make this syrup, or how do you do this infusion? And people were like, yeah, how do you get that zest shot? How are you doing your lighting? Even though we weren't shooting in bars much, people were like, how are you doing lighting like this in a bar environment? And wanting to know cameras and lenses. So I started to share some of that on High Proof Preacher, but I also still had plenty of people in there who were like, only wanted cocktails and could care less about capturing them. So that's where I kind of made this separate profile, and started just kind of doing the blog and social media account thing just on another account, but sharing the behind the scenes and sharing what camera I'm using and how I set things up to take pictures of a bottle. So for me, it was very much seeing, there's people who are interested in this, and it also was kind of this light bulb moment of creating the resources that I wished I had when I was starting out, because I didn't have a formal photography education. I honestly don't know many people who do nowadays. It's a lot of people just kind of figuring it out on their own. But for me, when I decided cocktail bartender photography, that's going to be the thing I want to chase down. I was just trying to consume as much content and as much education as I could, from YouTube, from blogs, and most of the stuff I could find, there wasn't really anything that was specific to cocktails or shooting in a bar environment. There's a lot of stuff on portraiture, so I've pulled a lot from that. So you can kind of see that in a lot of my bar photography, where I'm capturing bartenders in their element. None of it's posed, but I try to go with this cinematic lighting. So I've learned a lot from portraiture stuff. Learned a lot from food photography. There's a lot of food photography education, a ton of it, super oversaturated. There's so much food photography and food bloggers, but even that was tricky, because I had to translate it to drinks, because taking photos of cocktails or bottles, it's you're shooting something that's glass or transparent or semi-transparent, or you're taking a picture of a bottle, even your Casganes bottle sitting there. It's all right, it's glass, it's see-through. You want the liquid to look nice, but then you also have the label that isn't see-through, so you have to expose the label properly. Otherwise, what's the point if you can't see the label? And some labels have gold foil, so that's reflective and transparent. And also, so there's all these little nuances to capturing drinks and capturing liquid, especially when capturing a bartender, when you're, pouring something. Just that was something that I didn't really see much education specific to that. So that's where I just kind of figured it out as I went. And I still had people that I looked to for inspo, and but there wasn't a whole lot of just specific stuff to drink photography. So that's where I started just kind of sharing what I learned. I put out the Zest Shot tutorial on YouTube, and because that's just kind of something people are always asking about. And then started doing some hashtag challenges to kind of let's do a challenge on capturing a drip. A lot of people would do the splash photography, which I do a little bit, but it's kind of just annoying, where it's you've made this perfect cocktail and then you drop an ice cube in it and it goes everywhere. And it's kind of okay, I get it. It's fun to do, but it also is just why did you do that? So I kind of went the opposite of no, how can you capture a drip or capture a ripple in the top of a cocktail? And did this hashtag challenge on that, and it blew up, and people were it was something that was way more subtle and requires actually a lot of skill and attention to capture properly versus just dunking your cocktail. So with that, I put out an e-course called Cocktail Camera Pro. Put that out where it's all pre-recorded lessons. So it's an e-course. There's not a live element to it. It's very much you enroll, you sign up. There is a cost to it. But with that, it's once you're in it, it's you have access for life. There's no subscriptions or anything. The content's there. I add and update the course material over time, and people who are enrolled just get those updates for no additional fee. So I always kind of frame it as like an investment that will continue to benefit you.
Right.
So with that, it's all about, how to shoot in bars, how to shoot in dark environments, how to, set up a table in your kitchen to take pictures of cocktails that look epic, and how to capture liquid in motion, all of that stuff. So a lot of it's very heavily focused on lighting and mastering lighting, because that's always been kind of a big focus for me. And there's been a lot of feedback in the 2 years of it being out now. There's been several people who are like, yeah, like I was unemployed or at a career crossroads when I took your course. And I just talked to a guy in Ecuador, of all places, who's like, I lost my job as a bartender and I took your course. And he's like, I'm getting flown to Dubai to shoot this like restaurant in Dubai. Like,
oh, that's awesome.
He's now like in Ecuador, like the
oh man,
food
I gotta
and drink
take
photographer.
your course. The one thing I don't do is photograph my own stuff. Marius is going to be out of a job as soon as I take the course.
Of course.
I want to interject a question here, though. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, you're good.
But I just wonder, and just for viewers at home or for myself, I mean, I do have access to cameras. But what if somebody was just starting out with like a phone? You know, like I hear a lot like people like getting into like just wanting to photograph cocktails or make videos or whatever.
Yeah.
But all they got is a phone. So what about those people?
Those people, so I kind of did this backwards. A year, after having the course out for a year, definitely got a lot of people who are like, I'm not a professional photographer and I don't want to be. Because the pro course is very much like, you don't have to be a pro, but it's like you got to have a camera. You got to have like some rudimentary knowledge of exposure and aperture and shutter speed. And your average person, or like your bar owners, your bartender, even social media managers are like, I don't necessarily want to be a professional photographer who has to spend thousands of dollars on lighting and lenses. Would this course work for me? And I always was kind of like, I want your money, but being honest, but saying like, but no, like you're going to get into this and you're going to be like, you're going to be way over your head. So I've always been very honest with people about that, where it's like, I would love for you to take this course, but it's probably not for you. So that's where I then put out a year later. And this is where I kind of did it backwards. Probably should have put out the entry point first, but I put out Cocktail Camera 101, which is 10 lessons, it's 10 videos. They're each around like 15 to 20 minutes long. There's also downloadable resources with terms and visuals that you can kind of keep on your phone for easy reference. But I put that out where it's like all you need is a smartphone. Some of the lessons do get into, I bought, actually have it right here. I went on eBay and got a Canon Rebel used for $300, $75 lens. So a few of the lessons I was like, here's your phone, here's how to use it. That's all you need for the course. But I was also like, if you do want to even make a small upgrade, $350, here's what you can do with a DSLR. And kind of several lessons kind of walk through that.
Yeah, I mean, because maybe
just to give people kind of a way to...
Right, because maybe somebody wants to, like, all they can do is start with their phone, but then they might want to then learn enough of the terms to get into your pro course. So they need like a bridger to get into the pro course so that then they can start buying thousands of dollars. Because the worst thing is the guy that is like, oh man, I'm going to be a photographer, and buys thousands of dollars worth of equipment and lighting they don't know how to use, and then it just sits in the garage and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. So I very much kind of think of the 101 as the on-ramp, where it's like, if you just want to learn how to take better photos of drinks to promote your bar program, do some stuff for social media, but you're like, I already have a different career path, like you'll be happy with the 101 sort of thing. But it's also a good on-ramp for, if you want to progress. There are a few lessons that kind of show you like, here's how you can kind of up your game. But so I kind of did that as well and have that out. And then when I opened it, I started doing like a bartender scholarship where just kind of, again, like how I've mentioned, like there's kind of been this side of me of feeling like I kind of found the cheat code where it's like, oh, I didn't have to bartend, but I figured out this kind of like online bartender type thing. And shooting for bartenders and for bars, like I feel like I've been very like welcomed into the community, like kind of adopted more or less, where it's like, I don't really feel like I belong here, but the bars and the bartenders who have just given me so much support and love, I just was like, would love to do something to kind of give back and share the stuff I've learned because I've been shooting with these bartenders in bars. So I released like this, called it a bartender industry scholarship, where it's like, if you work for a bar, you can get this, the 101 100% for free. So I put out like a little form sort of thing where it's like, put where you work. If I can, I didn't even end up contacting any employers. It was more just like trying to get people not to lie to me, because there were plenty of people who signed up who didn't work for bars and at least kind of disclose that info. And I was like, this isn't for you. Here's you enroll for $100 sort of thing, but like you don't get it for free. So, but for bartenders, by the end of, I had the scholarship open for at least 6 months this last year in 2023. And we've had 1,500 bartenders through the program, that completely for free.
Like, and I'll tell you, because I actually have a story that sort of plays into this, and I think that what you did is amazing. Because at the beginning of the pandemic, or like during the pandemic is like, it was kind of like a real rude awakening for me, because I was bartending and doing Barfly, and Barfly was doing well, and I was doing okay in my job. And then I all of a sudden didn't have a job, and I was very, very lucky that I had this thing where I looked at Marius, we ran the numbers. Marius was like, I think we could probably fake it till we make it, and it like worked out. Like I was super lucky, especially because I have 2 kids, and I was like, just one day I was just out of a job. But during the pandemic, I noticed that there was a bit of sour grapes from the bartending community, looking at a bunch of influencers, a lot of whom never worked for a bar ever, getting these really expensive brand deals. And I had very mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, I was like, well, nothing is stopping you from making content. And these people that did it went out to make content. But on the other hand, I could understand the frustration of being in this industry where you've been working very closely with brands for a very long time in a much different capacity, and really having to fight for, various things for your bar program, and then watching people get, flown out to Dubai or whatever, or Ireland to go do these kind of amazing trips and get like, sometimes multi-$1,000 deals. And so I just think it's really commendable that you were like, maybe you didn't recognize that was happening, but you remedied it anyway by saying, listen, I'll give you my course for free, so that then you have the ability to do this thing, at least on a smaller scale, or figure out how to get into it to make yourself more valuable. Because I also think that during the pandemic, a lot of bars were like, we're not going to hire social media people anymore. The bar managers now have to be the social media people. So you guys just have to figure it out, because we don't want to have that in our budget, because the margins are slim. They're slimmer now. There's supply chain problems. We're not making as much money as we want, as we used to, and so we're just going to let those people go. So you're kind of servicing those people as well. That are like, now I have this whole other thing that I have to do as my job description.
Sure. Yeah, totally. And that's like kind of the reality too, where like even post pandemic now, bars, like especially independent bars and restaurants, like they aren't just like crushing it. Some are, but like a lot of people I talk with are just like, even this last holiday season, there's several clients, because I still shoot for bars and restaurants, and several of them are like, oh yeah, like November, normally a huge month, was like, we were looking at pandemic numbers. Part of that's like recession or whatever the excuses are now, but like they were like, this was supposed to be our money making time, and now we're heading into dry January, and like we're in the red. And that's where I was like, bars who are typically booking me for shoots are just like, we just don't have that kind of budget right now. And that's where I'm like, dude, I get that. And that's where I still do for some clients who I have long-standing relationships with. I try to do some pro bono shoots during the winter months, where I just know like they're partly because I am fortunate enough to have other streams of income. E-course is one of them, and then some brand support as well, where I'm like, like for some of these bars, it's like, I know like you're in the dark months, especially Portland. So it's like I try to do some shoots for free, but also with having the course, it's this way to kind of me sharing. I did this the other day where a bar manager was kind of commiserating about just content stuff and how much work it is, and I was like, here's a code. Take the course, give it to anyone on your team. I don't care. Like, don't just pass it out to anyone who comes into your bar. Right. But anyone on your bar team, just have them take it. And And that was kind of a way of like, that doesn't cost me any more time. It's like with the digital product too, like, yeah, I have to make money at the end of the day, but at the same time, I'm like, this is a digital thing. I'm not missing out on anything to just like share that with the people who will truly benefit from it. So yeah, so I've just tried to like take that mentality of just like, yeah, like, because I've had some photographers now. It's like there's kind of the sour grapes, like you said, of during pandemic with some bartenders. But I also kind of get it from photographers now who are like, what are you doing? Why are you sharing this knowledge for free? Like, but one guy was like, bartenders aren't photographers. Like you're putting other photographers out of work. I was like, no, none of these bars have the money to hire photographers, or most of them don't, you know? So, so far I think it's been a largely positive. But yeah, just trying to share the knowledge, but also just like give back to an industry that has been very good to me, and an industry that's still hurting in many ways, right? So
let me chime in there, because you know, as you're talking about all of this, like as a bar owner, like the end of this past year, we were hitting panic buttons as well, because it was like we had been doing so well coming out of the pandemic. Like we had survived, which is, you know, more than I can say for almost most of places, you know, like we survived, we were thriving a little bit better, we were doing better. And then this past fall, it was kind of like, what's happening? Why are the numbers regressing? And it took me a while to realize it was across the board. So I was like, oh, good. It's not just me, which is nice.
Right.
But then also to your point about like, you know, bar owners, managers, and people in the bar side not having the money to hire photography and videographers, that is literally one of the major reasons why I ever started making content. It was, I have my bar and I'm like, well, I can't hire someone to do marketing, right? I used to have a marketing company, but I was focused more on the graphic design side. It was, you know, menu design, you know, websites, and that was most of my stuff. And I started to dabble in videography and photography, but the big reason why I started making cocktail content is, yes, I loved to have been a bartender at that point for, I think, like 6 years or 5 years at that point. So I felt like I had a good grasp on what it is that I was talking about. But it was only, honestly, as a top of funnel thing to bring people into my restaurant, because truthfully, like I couldn't hire a company. I couldn't hire Jordan to be like, hey man, come take some photos of my bar and like, let's promote it. Right. Like, and one of my, he was like a mentor to me, and him and I actually ran a bar together. He's a photographer as well. So the one time that I did have someone come in and take photos professionally of me in the bar was with him, where he was like, dude, like, let me come in and shoot some stuff for you. But no, I think it's like Leandro was saying, super commendable. And I love that aspect. And that's really why I wanted to touch on the cocktail camera stuff, because it's such a good service and a good thing for people, because like you said, it's not like they're putting photographers out of a job. It's the fact that bars literally don't have margin as it is. And like Leandro said, they're now expecting bar managers to be like, hey, start making content. And I see a lot of it. Like I follow a lot of restaurants and bars in the area, and I see a lot of that here, like near me. They're like, no, like you just have to start making content, like on your day job, like during the day, like middle of a shift. You're like, well, I have to prep, I have to worry about all this, but now I have to also pose. Like it's a tough little thing.
I don't know. I mean, the professional photographers that I know that do cocktail content, none of them are hurt for work.
Sure. Yeah. And even with the 101 course, like I try to be very clear about it too. It's like, this course won't make you a pro photographer. Like this is the on-ramp, you know, it's like, but it's, you know, it's very much like, this is the foundation and just like very practical of like one of the lessons that gets the most kind of positive feedback is just like how to get the most out of your smartphone camera. Like that's the whole lesson. It's not even cocktail specific. I use cocktails as the subject, but it's like, here's your smartphone. Here's how to position it. Here's some settings you can adjust. Here's how to like think through exposure, even though on a smartphone, you aren't necessarily dialing in your aperture and your shutter speed. It's doing that for you. But like, here's some ways you can override some things to make the images you have in your mind actually work on your phone. So yeah, so that's from like, even with that course, it's like, it's not going to make you, you know, this pro whatever, but maybe it will be the start for some people.
Right.
Where for me, I'm like, yeah, like I was just piecing together YouTube stuff and blog stuff, where this is at least like, yeah, it's like anyone can learn how to do this. I learned how to do this on my own. It's more like the course side is more a way of like, here's this easy to follow, well laid out thing that kind of condenses it. It's like you can now learn this quickly and efficiently versus having to piece together random pieces of content to learn this. But yeah, it's something where I'm like, I feel like I kind of had that moment of like, all right, am I hurting somebody by trying to help somebody else? And ended up kind of being like, nah. Like, I mean, people are always going to, you can't make everyone happy, and there's always going to be someone who, kind of disses on you for whatever reason. But yeah, in the end, it's like within 6 months to have 1,500 bartenders in there. It was already better than I had hoped for. And right now, we kind of like paused basically if a bartender DMs me and says they want to take my course, I was like, here's a code. I at least kind of closed the doors kind of publicly for a bit, just because, you get 1,500 people in there. And even though it's pre-recorded, you get a lot of emails, a lot of questions. And I have an assistant. So it's just the two of us. And it's kind of like, it's basically like scaling really fast, but not actually having, it's like you don't have the support there. So I wanted to make sure we can actually properly support the people in the course. And yeah, just wanted to make sure like I'm not just throwing people in there and then they're just kind of like on their own. So I do want to open it up again. So I don't necessarily have like, go to this link and you can sign up. But I mean, yeah, if you're listening and really want in, like shoot me a DM. Again, if you're a bartender. If you're not a bartender, the course is like $97. It's $97. It's not like a huge investment, So yeah. And then like now we're working on like a video course, because these other ones are much more like kind of photo specific. Now we're kind of adding, the vertical video piece, because now that's, to put Instagram Reels and kind of adding that to it as well. So yeah.
To put it into perspective, most people waste $97 on their coffee budget every month. So
seriously, yeah.
I still want it for free
totally.
though.
Yeah, no, totally.
I want to pause here and just let you know that we're at about an hour and 20. We had an hour and 20. Okay. Marius?
Time flies.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. Just want to make sure we get through the questions, right? And stuff.
Yeah, no, I just have.
Oh, that's it. We're at the last one. Oh,
nice.
Yeah. Okay. Hey. Well, we only went 20 minutes over. We were trying to keep it to an hour, but it's been difficult.
Oh, this pacing for today has been great. But Jordan, the last question I have for you, it's one I've been asking all of our guests, and I love it because I think it tells a lot about the person, is if you could make and have a drink, if you could make a cocktail and serve it to someone and have it with them, who would the person be and what cocktail would you be making? If you need a minute, take a second, think about it, ruminate.
I think there's also wasn't there like an alive or dead
they can be alive or dead. Sorry.
Oh, hey, yeah, that really opens it up, man. Yeah, gosh, I know. Like, I have been asked this before. I know previously I've said like Michelle Obama, just because I think she's awesome, and I feel like she just seems like a martini gal to me. I was like, if she wants to bring Barack, she can, but. Whatever.
It's not really about him.
Yeah. It's like the reason simply because I think she's just super cool. But it's like I know I've had that answer previously, but I was like, okay, it could be someone throughout history. Like, whoa, that really is a big one there. So, gosh, I don't know. I mean.
The thing about the history thing though is that like people say like, oh man, maybe I would like do like Joan of Arc, but here's the thing. Yeah. If we I know that this is like a pie in the sky thing that would never happen.
Sure.
And it's not realistic. Yeah. But if you actually did get to sit down with Joan of Arc, would you even be able to speak or relate with one another?
Right. Probably not. And should be like a cocktail. What is
that? What is a cocktail? What is this? What is this devil water?
Yeah, seriously. What would she even drink back in the day? I don't know. Gosh, I know.
Was Joan of Arc French? Yeah. Wine.
Right. Yeah.
Just a lot of wine. A lot of wine and very weak beer.
Yeah. Right. And that would be it, right? She probably didn't even drink water back then.
No, I mean, actually, I think that they made wine to like purify the terrible water that they had. Yeah. And like beer, the alcohol killed the bacteria so they could render it safe. Although, obviously consuming alcohol is not good for you. So, but they didn't know that back then.
Yeah, sure. No, totally. Yeah, I feel like someone that would be like kind of fun or super interesting. This probably sounds super random from me too, but I feel like Walt Disney would be like really interesting person to like have a drink with. Mainly because like watch a documentary about him. I'm actually going to Disneyland next week, so maybe that's why that comes up. But but watch like this documentary. I forget. I'm sure it was something on Disney Plus, but like how he very much like, I mean, he built an empire, but before he died, like he had much bigger dreams of like creating kind of these huge like community. When he created Epcot, it was like wasn't meant to be a theme park. Like he wanted to kind of experiment with making just kind of these new ways of structuring actual livable communities and stuff where it's like I feel like we only have little fractions of some of the things he was like working on, and that's where you're kind of like, okay, how much is like true or just kind of legend or whatever. But it just was really fascinating to me. You're like, oh, that would be cool to actually hear from him of like, what did you envision Disney or these huge pieces of property you bought and then didn't get to do anything with in your lifetime. I just was like, oh, that would be a really interesting one, because I was like, Disney now is just this behemoth and ultimate story of capitalism. It's like I don't think that was like his dream. So that's where I was like, oh, that would be super fascinating to sit down with him. As far as what I'd make him, or I don't know, I might just pour him up some Cascanes and be like, yeah, man, let's.
You think he's a tequila guy?
I doubt it.
I doubt Walt Disney is a freaking Manhattan man.
Yeah.
Like he drinks Manhattans, like he double fists Manhattans. That guy.
Sure. Yeah, probably like puts a cigarette in them. But yeah. That's probably more accurate. I'm just like, I would love to get something flowing, just get him talking. Just tequila tends to do that really effectively. So,
all right. I mean, hey, you're the bartender. You can pour him what you want.
Pour him whatever you want.
If you're hanging out with Walt Disney and you're pouring tequila, he's drinking tequila.
Cool. Well, we're making him a añejo Manhattan. That's what we're doing. How about that?
I like that.
Trick him into drinking tequila.